Art Bell radio show, the Coast to Coast radio show. And so you have scientists like that who may, from the external point of view, look quite ordinary and orthodox in their ideas, but late at night they're listening to radio shows like this to get the real information about what's really going on. And sometimes they become intrigued by it, and they want to hear more about it. So I think that's something I see around the world, not just here in the United States, but in many different places. So you've got this open-minded group of scientists, who are the majority, actually, who may not accept my conclusions right away, but they're willing to listen. And then among that group, there's a small number who actually would agree with the kinds of things that I'm proposing in my books. But I think that's to be expected. That at this particular moment, the number who would agree with me would be small, but they're there.
Or the number that would admit that they agree with you.
Yeah, that's right. That may be another way to put it. And anyways, it's one reason why I have a certain amount of respect for Charles Darwin and his early followers, that at a time when nobody accepted their ideas, well, they had the courage to say, okay, well, this is what we think, this is what we believe is the real truth. And now, after 150 years, I think there's a lot of evidence mounting that their ideas don't really add up. And I think we're ready for some new ideas, but I give them credit for doing what they did, having the courage to do it.
So what is Richard Leakey's claim to fame? Is he claims that life began in Africa, or what is his?
Well, he was he comes from a very famous archaeology family, the Leakey family. It began with Louis Leakey, his father, and Mary Leakey, and then he was one of their sons, and he became a famous archaeologist in his own right, and was working mostly in Africa, helping to establish the theory of human evolution by work he was doing there. And he's also a spokesman for what you might call the very materialistic sort of fundamentalist Darwinist wing in the scientific community. So he was kind of motivated to give a very sarcastic comment about my book. So, but that's about what I would expect.
So there are extreme Darwin terrorists out there. Darwin extremists.
That's right.
Scientists with egos who are mad and they're not going to take it anymore.
Well, I think these are the scientists who accept the Darwinian theory of evolution, not for strictly scientific reasons. It's more of an ideology with them. For them, it sort of conforms to their prior belief in atheism and materialism, and therefore, they're very strict about it. They don't want to hear any other ideas. And as far as I'm concerned, anybody's got a perfect right to be an atheist or a materialist. That I have no objection if that's what they want to do. But I don't think they've got a right to impose their views on everybody else and use the government to do it. That's what I don't accept.
Absolutely. Now, your website is mcremo.com, www.mcremo.com. That's mcremo.com.
That's right. Yeah, mcremo.com, right.
So if people want to find out more information or how to get your books, they can go to the website and check it out.
Yeah, there's a museum of Forbidden Archeology there. There's also my travel schedule and any upcoming media events and things like that.
Yeah, in the Museum of Forbidden Archaeology, is that the part that has the
doors? The
doors with the California
yeah, I think that's
rush
the exhibit that's up there now.
Exhibit, yeah. What were some of the discoveries that were made there? I mean, you went over some of them before.
Yeah, well, a lot of different discoveries were made in different parts of the California gold mining region. and typically they involve miners, digging tunnels into the sides of mountains, and then very deep in these tunnels, they would be finding, human bones, human artifacts like stone mortars and pestles, obsidian spear points, things like that. Things that are obviously made by humans. And the human bones they found were those not of ape men, but of humans like us. So these discoveries were made at many different places in the gold mining region, and they were all collected by Dr. J.D. Whitney, who was the chief government geologist of California. He collected all of these things, and he investigated the cases very carefully. He went to the locations, he interviewed the discoverers, and he put it all together in a report, a book, that was published by Harvard University. And it's a very, very good scientific report about this evidence, but you just don't hear it mentioned today because of this process of knowledge filtration that I was talking about. And it wasn't really a satanic conspiracy to suppress truth. As I mentioned, there was this Dr. William Holmes who just said, well, if Dr. Whitney had understood the theory of human evolution, he wouldn't have published that report, because he would have known those facts couldn't possibly be true. So it wasn't that Holmes was trying to suppress what he regarded as true evidence. He just had the idea that what's really true is the Darwinian theory of evolution, and anything that contradicts it, there must be something wrong with that evidence.
Right.
That's the way they look at it. So, but I've been to the museum personally. A few years ago, I mentioned that the producer for Mysterious Origins of Man wasn't able to get in to see the artifacts, but a couple of years after that, I was preparing a report about these discoveries for a meeting of the World Archaeological Congress, which is the world's largest international organization of archaeologists. So the museum officials, they decided, okay, well, we'll let them in. So I did see them and photograph them, the artifacts, for that report that I gave at the World Archaeological Congress.
On one of your, and we're almost out of time here, but we got a couple of minutes. One of your appearances on Coast, you mentioned how that Nobel Prize-winning physicists Pierre and Marie Curie had conducted research showing evidence for mental powers like telekinesis or psychokinesis.
Yes, that's something you're not going to read about in your physics textbook, and that's something I go into in my book, Human Devolution, because there I'm trying to show that a human being is not just composed of chemicals. There's this subtle mind element with its very unusual powers, like psychokinesis. And some people are going to say, well, that's not scientific. But I say, all right, you don't know the real history of science. And I give this example very often because you've got Pierre and Marie Curie, who were husband and wife. They both got Nobel Prizes in physics for discovering radium and the radioactivity and things like that. But they were involved in psychical research. They were doing experiments with mediums on one occasion, and some experiments they were running in the Psychology Institute in Paris. Pierre Curie, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist, is there saying, he's observing a large table floating in broad daylight in the middle of this laboratory in Paris. This isn't somebody's dark parlor, where all kinds of tricks could be going on. I mean, the medium was there. Marie Curie was personally holding her hands, making sure she wasn't moving her hands. Other scientists were holding her feet, making sure she wasn't moving her feet. And Pierre Curie is saying, in the middle of the room, the lab room, in broad daylight, under what he called perfect conditions of observation, this large table is floating about 3 feet off the ground. So that's something you're not going to read about in your physics textbooks. You'll read about Marie and Pierre Curie discovering radium. You're not going to read about them saying that they're large objects floating in the middle of the air in scientific research labs in Paris early in the 20th century.
It's amazing how the media could ignore something like that, especially since they were so famous doing all the other research.
Well, I think the reason that the media ignored it is because the scientific community ignored it. Because the media followed the